rest of this week. We have next week. And then the following week is the Thanksgiving week, okay? And then when we come back from Thanksgiving, we have only 1 week left before the finals, okay? So we have a third exam and a fourth exam. So the third exam, tentatively, okay? So next week I'll have a better idea. I want to schedule that for the week of Thanksgiving. I'm sorry, you cannot take that week off. I cannot take it off either, but we'll schedule it for the week of that Thanksgiving week. Let's do it for Monday or Tuesday, okay? Monday or Tuesday. So the exact date, we'll confirm it next week. And then when we come back from Thanksgiving, we have only 1 week left, and then it will be your final week. You guys feel like the quarter went really fast, or? Yeah, I feel like that too. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at the last part we have discussed in terms of the investment line, and that is what we call the private income expenditure equilibrium. Okay. So let's take a look at that. So let's draw another diagram. So now we have CNI on the vertical axis, national income GDP on the horizontal axis, okay? And this is our 45-degree angle line. And we have our upward sloping C plus I line, okay? So again, what this is telling us, so remember GDP is made up of C, I, G, and the foreign sector. Okay, so GDP is made up of all four sectors. If you only look at the expenditures in the economy, right? So this vertical axis that measures the expenditures in the economy. If you only look at the expenditures in the economy by private consumers and private investors, businesses, we will end up with that level of GDP. So that's what that number is telling us, okay? So if you only look at the expenditures by C and I, that is the level of GDP or national income that we would get, okay? So leaving the foreign sector aside for right now, so this equilibrium right here, there's a term that we use for that. So let's call that YP. And YP means this is called the private income expenditure equilibrium. Okay? So if you only look at the expenditures by the private sector, private consumers and businesses, we get a certain level of national income. So that level of GDP or national income is called the private income expenditure equilibrium. Okay? Okay, so that is the national income we get when we are only looking at the private, the economy in terms of the private sector, C plus I. Okay? Okay. So now in terms of the classicals and the Keynesians, right? In terms of the model itself, the classicals would not have any argument against this, right? This is called the Keynesian model, but it's just, another way of illustrating how the economy works. That's it, right? Now, the difference between the classicals and the Keynesians would be is that at this point right here, at that private income expenditure equilibrium, if you were a classical economist, you would say that that private income expenditure equilibrium, that equilibrium we get only looking at the private sector, can also be equal to our full employment equilibrium. In other words, that is the full employment, that is the output or national income that we get when the economy is fully employed, that the two are equal or could be equal under the classicals. However, under the Keynesian thinking said we cannot focus on the private sector alone to achieve that full employment situation. So for them, that would not be equal to full employment. Okay. That would not be equal to full employment. So if that is not equal to full employment, then we need the third part in the economy, right, to take us to that full employment point. And the third part that would take us to the full employment point would be the government spending. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so if you can take a look at your notes. Okay, so now this is kind of important in terms of the understanding. Okay? Okay. So now the question is, why would it not be equal? Okay, the question is, for the classicals, whatever that the private sector was operating, that can be equal to our full employment. But for Keynes, he felt that if you focus on the private sector, that we would not achieve that full employment point. In fact, he said if you only focus on C plus I, that would lead the economy either into a recession or it could lead the economy into inflation. So for Keynes, if you focus on the private sector, the workings of the private sector would either lead the economy into a recession or it would lead the economy into an inflationary situation. Okay? So now the question is why, right? Why did Keynes think so? Okay? So for that, let's take a look at this definition or the concept I have given you. So it says, due to the multiplier effect. Now, do you guys remember the multiplier effect from yesterday? So what does the multiplier effect? Is that if you plug in a certain amount, it creates additional amount of national income of GDP because that income multiplies in the economy. Okay? So there's a multiplier effect. Okay, so in other words, if I put $10 into the economy, and if the multiplier is 10, it creates $100 worth of national income, not $10. Okay? So that's the multiplier effect. Okay, so this is due to the multiplier effect, any changes in private expenditures can magnify the effect on national income. So let's say that just like if I put $100, it creates, some additional amount of income. What would happen if I take out $100 from the system? So instead of putting in, I take $100 out from the system. Then what would happen?
It has a bigger impact.
Then the national income is not going to go down by 100. It's going to go down by that much bigger impact depending on what the multiplier is. Okay, whether it's 10, whatever the number is. Okay, so it works both ways. So for Keynes, he felt that if you think about the Great Depression, right, GDP doesn't have to fall by a very large amount, or spending doesn't have to fall by a very large amount. If the multiplier is high and spending even falls by the smallest amount, right? So for example, the investment, right? Suddenly companies see people are not buying things in the economy, things are not going well in the economy, and they just cut back by a small amount. But even if they cut back by a small amount, because of the multiplier effect, GDP can go down by a very large amount. On the other hand, if you are very close to the full employment point, right, and somebody increases expenditures, so let's say we are very close to the full employment and somebody increases expenditures, then what can that cause in the economy? It can cause inflation in the economy because it suddenly creates all that more additional income. Okay, because of that multiplier effect. So it can magnify either way. So the two effects, one is called the recessionary or the contractionary gap, and the other is called the inflationary or the expansionary gap. So let's take a look at the two in terms of a graph again. Okay, so the recessionary, this is when the output is less than the full employment point. So let's go ahead and draw the recessionary gap. So still, let's have C plus I on the vertical axis, national income GDP, my 45-degree angle line. So now I want to show that the economy has a recessionary gap. So that means that given some level of C plus I, so this is my private income expenditure equilibrium, YP. Okay. So if you are in a recession, that means our full employment point would be to the right of our private equilibrium we have right now. So we say then, okay, so now pay attention, this difference, that gap, that difference is called our recessionary gap. Okay. Now why is that vertical difference called our recessionary gap? It's called the recessionary gap because to get to that full employment point, right, this entire C plus I line has to jump up by that difference. That's it. Okay, so that's a parallel shift there. So if you want to get to that full employment point, that entire C plus I line has to increase by that difference in terms of the two curves. So that difference between those 2 points is called the recessionary gap. Okay. On the other hand, so in a recessionary gap, the full employment lies to the right of the private income expenditure equilibrium. On the other hand, let's draw an inflationary gap. Again, we have our 45-degree angle line. We have our C plus I. So that is our private income expenditure equilibrium. Okay. If we are facing an inflationary gap, that means our full employment point is to the left of that equilibrium. So that difference, okay, I hope all of you can see, that difference is called our inflationary gap. Okay, so that difference is called the inflationary gap because to achieve our full employment level of GDP or national income, the C plus I line has to fall, right? That level of expenditures have to fall by that difference. Okay, so for Keynes, right, if you focus on the private sector would either lead the economy into a recessionary gap or it would lead the economy into an inflationary gap. Because of what reason? Because of the, what's the reason? Huh? Because of the multiplier effect. Because the smallest, right, addition to expenditures can cause inflation, or the smallest subtraction from spending can lead the economy into a recession. Okay, so that multiplier effect magnifies both more spending or less spending in the economy. Okay, okay. So if the private sector can lead either to a recessionary or inflationary gap, then the solution, obviously, that Keynes recommended was government. So government had to come in to stabilize the economy, either in the case of a recession or in the case of inflation. Okay? Okay, so let's do a few more calculations. Okay? Okay. So here, again, we are going to make things a little bit easy and also assume, so I don't want to write on my notes, but say government spending is also autonomous. So in other words, if the government wanted to spend, how much they spend is not a function of how much taxes they have collected, anything like that. if the government wants to spend, they would spend that quantity. So government spending is also considered autonomous. Okay. Okay, so here I have given you an example. Okay. So now can you find the new level of national income here? So you have to draw first a consumption line. So let's go ahead and draw the three lines. So we have a C, I, and G now on the vertical axis. Then I have national income, GDP, my 45-degree angle line. I have my upward sloping consumption line. Onto that C plus I line. And if government expenditures are autonomous, the only thing that will happen is that this line is going to go up by that amount of government expenditure. So I get my C plus I plus G line. So there are only 6 points there. I need information. I need to know what those numbers would be and what those numbers would be. Okay. Okay. So let me give you a couple of minutes. So what's the first thing you should calculate here? The multiplier. That's right. Okay. So you can look at your notes from yesterday if you cannot remember. Oh, that's not the one, right? Okay. So first thing, calculate the multiplier, and once you have the multiplier, then you can get all the other numbers. Okay. So, given this equation, what is MPC equal to in this equation? 0.8. Okay. If the MPC is 0.8, then what's the multiplier equal to? 5, right? Okay. So multiply again, right? So once you calculate that number, it's 1 over 1 minus MPC, 1 over 1 minus 0.8, 1 over 0.2, which is equal to 5. Okay. So if you are still struggling with trying to get that number, I'm just telling you, you need to be knowing how to get that number by now. Okay. So for example, by next week, you should know the chapters on Keynesian economics really well, because this is a lot of calculations. Okay. Okay. So that would be 5. So if that multiplier is 5, then the rest of the information becomes really easy. Autonomous consumption is what number? 100. Autonomous C plus I is equal to 150. And C plus I plus G is equal to 200. 500. So the difference here is the change in investment of 50. Difference here is the change in government of 50. Okay? So if the multiplier is 5, then what is our first level of national income at this point? 500. Second point? What is it? 750. And the third one? 1,000. So what is the new level of national income? So always when we talk about the new level of national income, we are talking about the sum, okay, of C, I, and G. You have to add back all three levels of expenditures that we are looking at. Okay? Okay, very good. Now the same kind of a concept I've just given it to you in a different way. So go ahead and calculate that for me. So but draw the diagram. Okay, but draw the diagram. So vertical axis, C bar G, national income GDP, 45-degree angle line. I have a consumption line and a C plus I line. So in the earlier example, I gave you the number for G and I asked you what is the new level of national income. So here I have given you our goal of 800 and asking you by how much should government then change. Okay. Okay, so here, again, the first thing is to calculate the multiplier. Multiplier in this case is equal to what number?
4.
4. So if our autonomous consumption is 50 there, then our national income is equal to 200. Investment increases by 100, so change in investment is equal to 100. Our new level of national income would be how much? 600. And then this says that our full employment is at 800, that is our full employment, and it's asking, so, okay, let me ask you one thing here. So if full employment is at 800, and we are currently 600, are we facing a recessionary or an inflationary gap? We are facing a recessionary gap, and what is the recessionary gap? It's from this point right there, right? That difference is the recessionary gap. So the question is, to get this extra 200 that we need, by how much does government have to increase? It has to increase by 50. So that vertical difference would be 50, right? So that change in G is equal to 50, take us to 200. 200 times 4 is 800, right? Or that difference 200 divided by 4 gives us a change in government to be at 50. Okay? So either way you want to do it, that's fine with me. Okay? Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is, always when we are talking about government expenditures, what's the first question we have to ask ourselves anytime the government is spending? From where are they getting the money to spend? Okay, we have to ask that question whenever the government is spending. So one thing that we are going to look at, we'll start this tomorrow, we are going to take a look at the effect of taxes once we introduce government into the picture. Okay, the effect of taxes. Okay. So, but I think I'll just leave that for tomorrow. Let's do a quiz today. So, actually, let me see what the questions are. Okay, let's do this without looking at your notes today. Okay, so just take a blank piece of paper. All your notes, books away, just a blank piece of paper, put your name on it. So this one doesn't have any calculations, okay, but we might do one tomorrow where